Hello, this is Michelle with the Glimmers of Intuition. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to get on here and say that what is being presented in front of you isn't evidence of what is true for you. And what I mean by that is, especially when we're in like undesirable circumstances, we think that that is the end all be all and nothing can change and nothing will change. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. And a lot of times we get triggered and we get upset because, rightfully so, like what we're seeing in front of us seems to be it. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. And for a lot of my life, I kind of lived in this, kind of short little box, if you will, that, if things in front of me were bad, that they were always going to be bad and it was always permanent. And going through, belief work and, learning to, allow myself to feel safe, like stabilizing my nervous system has been paramount in that, because I've turned a lot of things that should have not turned in my favor. And when I started to kind of, go a little bit deeper and to not necessarily saying you have to go on this big healing journey, but learn, what is the belief behind it. And usually the belief is pretty evident, because what you're experiencing, especially if you're in an undesirable circumstance, rather it be with, money, career, a partner, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the money or the partner. It has to do with the story that you have in that area of your life. And when I finally realized that piece, it was like, okay, now I can run with this and go. Because our beliefs kind of run our behavior, and they also can also be the set point. Like, let's say that you're in a capacity at work where you don't make six figures, but your goal is to make six figures or more. Until you conquer what you believe is true for you and you regulate your nervous system, you're not going to be able to sustain that, because that's just not, your brain is wired to keep you safe. So when that is not, when the belief is not ingrained or isn't there, you're going to kind of self-sabotage. You're going to go back to what your brain is very smart, and it's going to go back to what feels safe. So a lot of times when we're doing belief work, we start to feel uncomfortable and we think that we're doing something wrong. And it's like, no, you're doing something right. Especially if you're in like your 40s or your 50s, you got to think that how long these beliefs have been running the show, and especially for us that have been divorced, in the love arena, we, you kind of feel like there's a lot of feelings of defeat, and you feel like that, there's a lot of shame, but being on the other side of that now, I realize that, it's just all in the belief and the story that you're telling yourself. And that's why, like, you'll see content that'll say, the circumstances don't matter, especially if, let's say, you're in no contact with somebody, or, you had a big fight or whatever the case may be, and that, things can work out and things can work in your favor and you can sustain that. It's more so just going within and changing that story, rather than, looking to that person for the validation. An example of this is, to tell yourself a new story in love, and to kind of catch yourself and be like, okay, what has been the story? And the story is about what you've been experiencing, especially the one benefit of being a little older is you can see the pattern. If it's in money, if it's in love, what the belief is, and a lot of times is, we don't feel supported. Good things don't last, and if you look in your childhood, not that you're blaming your parents or your caregivers, but if there was certain phrases that were on repeat, that's how your subconscious mind, repetition is how we created these beliefs in the first place. So if you were told like money doesn't grow on trees, and again, it's not this whole journey I've encompassed is it's a growth process, and it's a growth process for me to experience more of what I want to experience, not necessarily, lashing out at, people around me in this sense, because at the end of the day, like, it's all up to me and what I want to create. And there's a lot of empowerment in that. And when you do that, you're going to feel so empowered. You're going to feel so, it's just going on this journey. Not everybody does it because, one, I think that they just don't realize that it's for them, or they turn back when they start to feel kind of that resistance, or they don't feel, they just don't, it's something that you just have to keep persisting in, and a good example of this would be like lottery winners, the ones that they win the money and within a year they're broke. It's because, one, their nervous system isn't used to having this kind of money or wealth, and two, the belief, that either money doesn't last or good thing, whatever the case may be. And for me, going through divorce, and for me going through bankruptcy, and, just being in a part of my life where, I do know that a healthy marriage is possible for me. And for a long time, I didn't think that was the case, especially after going through divorce, and the same thing in finances. And, telling myself a new story in my career has really helped me excel and, continue to tell that story. And it doesn't have to be like an all day practice. It could be when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed, if you get a little time during the day, and it can be like a meditation, but allow it to be a growth process. Allow yourself to grow into who you want to be and be unapologetic about it. There's some people that, you don't have to tell everybody. Like with my belief work, I don't really kind of like tell, I don't really tell anybody unless they ask about it. And again, that is that relationship you have with yourself. And as you continue to build that relationship, the things around you start to mirror what you're telling yourself rather than what is, and something else that helped me to kind of put things in perspective is, the current 3D, what I'm experiencing now is kind of my old thoughts and assumptions and beliefs. So if I go in to change that, there is going to be a little bit of a lag. Some people may say that's a limiting belief, but that's just how I experience it. Take it as you will. But once you get to realize and, you're telling yourself this new story, that is what you're going to experience. So, and that is kind of the law, especially with like law of assumption, like what you assume to be true for yourself is what is true. So I just wanted to get on here and say that because I, for the longest time, used to think that what was in front of me, like it was permanent, what, my desire, what I wanted, there was no way in hell. And now I know a lot better. So take care of yourself. And until next time, see you next time.